companies and individuals recognizing that the only way we get past misinformation is if we are careful about what we say and we use the power that we have to limit the spread of that misinformation. That's going to be a critical part of how we get through this pandemic.
So the fake doctor in the Undertaker suit says if you don't censor this person, people will die. And what other time in American history would a government official say something?
I've never seen anything like it.
Say something like that, and then be parroted by everybody else in the media. On some show called The View, which has very limited vision, one host called on Spotify to just pull Rogan off the podcast.
I do think as the podcast platform, you have to have some sort of guidelines. How about a disclaimer on his podcast that says, this is misinformation? How about removing some of the podcasts that disseminate this misinformation?
They have.
And that's
Those people are complaining.
He put a disclaimer on my Facebook stuff.
Misinformation in our society comes from the people in power.
And my
That's
YouTube
what gets
stuff.
us into wars under false pretenses. That's what gives us medicine that doesn't work. Everything that hurts huge numbers of Americans that is misinformation comes from the people in charge.
Exactly.
From a podcast on Spotify. Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution. He joins us to assess what we're watching now. Professor, thanks so much for coming on. What is this? Why Joe Rogan all of a sudden needs to be destroyed, says the Surgeon General.
Yeah, I think three adjectives described him. He's uncontrollable, he's unpredictable, and he's powerful. And as long as he was sort of flirting with the candidacy of Bernie Sanders, or he had a smaller audience, they thought he would be useful in some way. And now he's a complete maverick. He didn't go through the traditional avenues to achieve fame and fortune and influence, and they can't control him.
Exactly.
And it's so asymmetrical, because I remember that petition where 1,000 healthcare workers swore to us that for the mental health of people, they could violate the quarantine. They forced everybody else to follow right after the George Floyd death, when they green-lighted going out in the street and phalanx yelling and screaming against the quarantine. That was okay. Or Anthony Fauci telling us that masks had no efficacy at first, and then one mask, and why not try two? So it's asymmetrical. And this idea that he's doing something wrong, or he's creating bad ripples throughout society. I remember the Shakespeare in the Park. Remember that summer play they put on 2 years ago of Julius Caesar, yes, where they ritually stabbed the President of the United States every night on their presentation? Or Game of Thrones had a decapitated head of George Bush, and they thought that was funny. And I remember the Kendrick Lamar To Pimp a Butterfly album, and they had a dead white judge who looked on the White House grounds, who looked like Ronald Reagan, with a lot of African-American youth toasting him with cash and champagne. And that earned him an invitation to the White House, where Barack Obama said he was his favorite rapper. So it's not symmetrical, and they're angry because they can't control him. He's, as I said, unpredictable. And he has a special demographic, these 18 to 40-year-old men, especially, of all different races and ethnicities. And I think that's a rising rubric. And when you look around at all the traditional outlets, on the conservative or libertarian movement, people have tuned out the Drudge Report, the sad demise of Rush Limbaugh. Howard Stern is sort of descending, and he's the up and coming. The problem with the left have is not that he has 11 million listeners or 200 million downloads per month, but it's the beginning. It's getting bigger and bigger. And he's becoming a pop cult figure that they don't know what he's going to say at any given moment.
They're dying.
Kind of like me.
Of course, thank God. Big James Hanson, thank you.
They check all my shit before they send it out.